Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. We thank you, everyone out there, for taking part of your week and listening to my rambling and my nonsense, but we appreciate it nonetheless. Today, we are going to jump into a really cool category, and I'm going to let our guest talk a little bit about it, but let me introduce him first. He's the co-founder and CEO of alwaysAI, Marty. Marty, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we can talk a little bit about your background, and then what
Yeah,
Always AI does.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, like you said, name's Marty, and started Always AI about 5 years ago, and we're completely focused on computer vision, which I know we're going to get into and what that means for restaurants. And I myself, I have a long background in Silicon Valley and enterprise software and mobile software, mobility. A lot of years of experience in those areas.
I love it. I love it. So, just because the words AI, machine learning, computer vision get
Yep.
thrown around, before we
Yeah.
jump into a little bit about your background, I guess give me your definition of how you would define AI, how you would define computer vision, and how you would define machine learning. Because I just got back, like I said, from a trade show recently, and it's amazing how every single booth had some form of AI
Yeah.
in their booth, and it's like, well, do you really have AI, and what does that really mean? So I'd love for you
Yeah.
to educate our listeners on how
Yeah. I
you would
mean,
define those things.
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, obviously, AI is really about, can we get machines to do work for us, predict for us, be quote unquote intelligent, for us. Machine learning is a technique within Always AI that helps computers, cameras, cars, drones, all kinds of things do smart things. It's really, at the end of the day, a lot of math
Hmm.
and just kind of grabbing a lot of data and then making predictions off that. Computer vision is a super interesting subset of AI,
Absolutely.
and it is just completely focused on vision. So you can almost think about it as, one of the most powerful senses of the human body is sight,
Hmm.
and trying to apply sight, and leverage sight in computers, and in my case, particularly in cameras.
I love it.
So that's what computer vision is.
I love it. I love it. And funny enough, I think we weren't calling it AI, but there's been AI inside of computer applications for years. We just never
Yeah,
really knew, and now
correct.
it's kind of the big buzzword. And a little bit more about your background. You said you were in Silicon Valley. Talk to me about some of the previous projects you worked on that kind of were related to this, or that kind of gave you
Yeah,
the idea for creating Always AI.
yeah. I started off in big enterprise software companies like Oracle, and really went through the whole transformation of kind of the client server world into the web based world, and then from there I spent a lot of time in mobility. That was really about taking the web out to our mobile phones, out to our smartphones, and that was a super interesting. We're all living on our phones. Obviously, we're all managing our businesses on our phones, but there was a time when that wasn't the case, right? And we had to kind
Absolutely.
of make that transition. And now we're pushing from the mobile phone out to the actual real world, where the real world is actually doing that work for us without us asking, right?
Yes.
So now you've got a bunch of sensors and cameras, and they're doing stuff without you initiating that on your mobile phone. So it's kind of the next wave
Hmm.
of pushing intelligence closer and closer to real time, and where we're actually living and working.
Well, and I think for our audience that's less familiar, but if you listen back to the last maybe 10 podcasts that we've had that have gotten posted, there's been a lot of people that are using AI and machine learning to solve some unique problems, from food cost management to food
Hmm.
preparation management. Talk to me a little bit about what are you guys trying to tackle at Always AI as it relates to restaurants? Talk to me a little bit
Yeah,
about, kind of, because there's so many different areas of opportunity where
yeah,
people have had data but don't necessarily know what to do with it, and that's where
right,
you guys come in.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think right, because Silicon Valley always has the latest buzzword and trend, and it's getting pushed and marketed. And what the heck does it really mean for me, like as a restaurant operator?
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it's kind of like, can some of this stuff improve my margins, right? So if I'm making 5% margin or 10% margin, can I make 12% or 15% by using some of these technologies, right? And in our case, it really is about, is there real time data that you would find useful, about your customers, What are they buying? Where are they going in the store? What are they doing? What kind of customers do I actually have? How
Mhm.
many do I have? Right. That's an example. Or operations. Okay, I'm running a fast casual restaurant, and okay, am I as productive as I could be? Am I
Yep.
wasting resources? Is my labor as efficient as it could be, et cetera? So these are the things that real-time data can actually help you act on, right? And so forget about buzzword AI, computer vision. It's just, can I get real-time data that I, as a manager, as an operator, can actually improve my margins,
Yep.
right? And that's what we've been seeing that happen with a lot of different customers, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But that, at the end of the day, if I can't help a restaurant operator do that, then I am just kind of selling a technology they don't really need, right?
Yeah. Well, technology for technology's sake, we talk about it all the time on the
Right.
show. It's like technology for technology's sake does nothing for us. You wouldn't be
No,
living on your phone if it didn't make your life easier, if it didn't make your life better, if it didn't
right.
make your life faster.
That's right.
Some might
Right.
some might argue that it's also made us much more distracted, and there's other side effects of it. But at
No,
the end
that's
of the
true.
day, I think humans will adapt to that as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, well, there's always, again, despite Silicon Valley saying it's all good.
Yeah.
There's always consequence of all these technologies you just mentioned. A
Yeah.
couple, obviously, in the case of computer vision, you worry about things like privacy, and
Hmm.
you want to make sure that you can protect people's identities and so forth. But again, at the end of the day, this is business, right? This is about, I'm trying to improve my margin, and I'm willing to invest in technology if it can do that. And I know the restaurant industry has got a lot of different technologies, POS terminals, they've got all kinds of different technologies. It's pretty fragmented.
Yes.
Is is
Pretty
is kind
fragmented.
of my
Very fragmented.
Right? Yeah, it's fragmented, and AI comes onto the scene, and I think all we do is we focus on, look, if you have some cameras are already installed,
Hmm.
we can get those cameras doing work for you that they're not doing right now. We can make them a lot smarter, and we can give you that information. We can deliver it to your mobile phone. We can deliver it to your laptop, however you want to consume it. But we can get you that information
Yeah.
by leveraging, these computer vision techniques that are now much more cost effective and easy to implement.
Yeah, no, and I think the last guest we had on that I had on most recently, they talk about it. Almost everybody has cameras installed in some way, shape, or form, but typically they've installed these cameras so that they can manage slip and falls, they can manage
Mm-hmm.
robberies, they can manage like really bad incidents, and they're really not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily using these to do anything. From a front of
Mm-hmm.
the house journey perspective, talk to me about some of the areas that you guys are
Mm-hmm.
using cameras to tackle either guest
Sure.
engagement, guest traffic, guest
Yeah.
retention, attrition, where people
Yeah.
walk in and they see the lines too long. Talk to me a little bit
Yeah.
about how you guys are solving that on
Sure.
the front of the house to drive additional revenue.
Yeah. No, it's great question. So I think the main use case that we is kind of just give me basic customer analytics. That's a fancy way of saying who's walking into my Burger King, for example,
Hmm.
and then speed of service,
Yep.
right? So they want to know from the time that Jeremy walked in and ordered a burger, paid for it, and waited. How long did that take, right?
Yep.
And if you start understanding the average amount of time it would take, then you can pick out anomalies like, wow, that person's been waiting for 9 minutes or something. We got to take some kind of an action. So you start understanding who's actually in the store and how long is it taking us to serve that person. The other thing about the front is also where are they going. Now this bleeds a little bit maybe outside of restaurants and more into like classic retailers, but it's kind of where are they going? Like
Yep.
where do people tend to congregate? Where do people tend to go, et cetera? So you start getting that information. But again, back to our earlier discussion, it's kind of like, okay, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Well, maybe you're not serving people as quickly as you can. So we are working, for example, with Burger King in Europe, and it's speed of service. I mean, literally down to like seconds of how long it takes. And they want to know by certain zones. So a zone would be like somebody walked in, another zone would be they ordered, another zone would be they paid, another. So you can start getting down to that kind of granular level where it's like, wow, we really have a problem on the payment side,
Yep.
right? For example. Then the other thing I would just mention is obviously tons of people are never going into a store. It's drive through.
Yep.
right? And so that's a very similar analysis. How many cars are coming in? Are people, why would somebody abandon a lane, or people getting frustrated, or hey, am I matching up the right car at the first window with delivering stuff at the second window? Some basic stuff.
Yep.
And again, this is where one camera, that you probably already have installed, can help you analyze that. And again, you can understand how many cars, what kind of cars, what are the demographics of the people in the car. You can start learning that type of information. So really, at the end of the day, it's like, who's coming to my establishment, and how long is it? Am I serving them as efficiently as I could?
Yeah, and I mean, historically, and I know you're newer to the restaurant space. I mean, historically, that
Yeah.
would be a company that would come in and study these things. It wouldn't be able to happen
Yep.
through an analytics through a camera. It would be a company that would
Yep.
sit here and look at traffic, or it'd be a door
Yeah.
sensor. We've all gone to a retail shop and had those sensors that you
Yes.
have to walk through to get in or out. That was the only way they
Yeah.
measured those things.
Yeah.
What other kinds of data? Because you talked about privacy kind of on the front of the house. I want to stay
Yeah.
on the front of the house for a few more minutes. You've
Sure.
got the privacy aspect, but we talked about it pre-show. I've got 4 kids. So sometimes when I go in, I'm just my wife and I to that Burger King.
Mhm.
Sometimes when I go in, I've got just my kids. Sometimes
Mhm.
I go in and I've got
Right.
my kids and my wife, and my basket, that what I buy from the brand is going to be different
Mhm.
depending upon
Yeah.
what my use case is. Are you guys able to get to that level of data to be able to say that this most likely is a male that's in his mid 40s,
Yeah.
or
Yes. Yeah.
you obviously don't know who I am, or maybe you do, and this is all part
Yeah.
of Skynet that nobody's going to talk to you about. But at the end of the day,
No. No.
Facebook knows that I'm
Yeah.
there probably, or Google knows that
Right.
I'm there most likely. So
Yeah. Yeah.
talk to me a little bit
Yeah.
about how
No.
you guys are attributing that, and then what happens with the
Sure.
basket.
Sure. It's a great question. Yeah. Well, let's just talk about it practically for a second. So the um, the old style, like the sensors you mentioned,
Hmm.
yeah, that counts. But if Marty Beard walks in, then I walk out, then I walk back in, they say that's 3 customers,
Yep.
right? Well, obviously it was one. So one of the things that computer vision needs to do well is what's called re-identification. In other words, don't double count Marty. Make sure that that's just that
Interesting.
one person. And so you get a real count. You really start understanding. And those are computer vision techniques. And number 2, what can I know about Marty? What's pretty commonly used today that's possible, not super expensive? Definitely gender, definitely age. You can get into we have one customer that's looking into what are they wearing. For this particular customer, that's important.
Hmm.
And and even people are starting to talk about emotion, and it's all about just training a model to do what you want it to do. And the more data you can get into the model, the more accurate it is, right? So, but things like gender, things like number, how many distinct, I don't want to double count Jeremy or Marty, just how many distinct, totally possible. Is male, female, except totally possible. Rough age, totally possible, right? So all that stuff is pretty easy based on existing models out there, and we've done this many times. Your next question was harder, which is, okay, there's groups of people,
Yeah.
they congregate. You're carrying one child, you have another child below. This is where you get into some of the complexity about, okay, is your camera up on the roof
Hmm.
looking down? Gets a little more difficult. Is it on the side? Do you have just one camera or 2 cameras? So then now you get into a little bit of the complexity of what can I see? What can the camera actually see?
Hmm.
And based on that, that will drive a lot of the accuracy of what you've been able to calculate. But again, if you came in by yourself versus you came in with your family, the computer vision application should be able to know it's the same you.
Yep.
Right. Now, privacy, that doesn't mean that I'm revealing, like in the case of Burger King for us, there's never a name associated with that. It's
Yeah.
just it's a numeric value that just says, I know that numeric value is a distinct human, it's the same person, etc. We do have situations where we have one customer that their employees opt in to be identified. Why? Because when they're counting people coming in, they want to know, oh, don't count that. That's an employee, not a customer.
Yep.
Right. So that's opt in. That's like, yes, I'm allowing you to see my face and identify that's Marty Beard, etc. So it's kind of a long answer, but yeah, all that
Yeah.
stuff's possible today and not super gnarly. And we're not talking about major months-long projects and so forth.
Or privacy. I mean, and it's funny because the more, over the last probably year or so, as we've gotten back out of COVID and I start to meet with people like yourself and others in the space, it's amazing how far a lot of this stuff has come. And to your point earlier in retail, the models are able to be built and you're able to see that. And the more data you get, the smarter they get, and the smarter they get, the more accurate they are. I'm going to stay on the front of the house for a few minutes. And you talked about real-time alerting. So Marty's unhappy, and I'm starting to I understand state, because Marty is gone now. He's ordered, and my normal window time might be 6 minutes to prepare the food and get it bagged and call Marty, but he's now at 10 minutes. What are we doing with that data? Are you at a place, and is it alwaysAI at a place where they're going to be able to give some alerts to the management to do something about Marty being upset? And if so, what's that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of apps are just integrating SMS messaging. Right. Some of your listeners might have heard of a company called Twilio, right? So you just basically integrate messaging into the application. So what does that mean? You just set it up to say, I'll give another example. Like, I'm a construction company. There's somebody up on a roof they're not roped in.
Yeah, they're not harnessed,
right. Yep. Right now, I need to know that. Right. In the case of a restaurant, you would set up parameters to say, okay, if somebody's been waiting longer than X, then I want the manager to get that message right away and be able to act on it. So yeah, this is very common. It's mostly text and just what I would call just messaging based alerts, but easy to do, easy to set up as triggers within the computer vision app. And and then obviously it's up to the management to say, okay, what do you want to know? You don't want to spam the manager so they can't do their work. Right. So you got to be careful. Like, we all experience that in our consumer notifications, It's like, please stop.
Yeah. And we end up opting out half the time, which is a bad thing. So, or we ignore them. So I had somebody actually ask me a question for this, and I'd love just to get your thoughts, because I know that some of our listeners are going to want to do this. Is oftentimes managers in a casual dining environment are managing bathroom cleanups, and they're managing table touches, and they're managing drink refills. Is machine learning and computer vision to a place where you can see the person leaving the coast stand and tracking that they went to the bathroom to do a bathroom check to make sure that it was clean? Like, are we at that place where we're able to do that, or we're able to see that Marty Beard is down to his last 2 ounces of beer and he's on his first course, so we probably should go offer him another beer before he leaves?
That one is pretty sophisticated. The first one, let me address the first one. Okay. So the first one, all you do is you have a data set of things that you're interested in learning about. And what you do is you set up zones. So one zone is the bathroom, and one zone is, behind the counter, and one zone is in front of the counter, and one zone is where people sit down. So you easily identify these zones, and then you gather data in each zone, right? Then you say, okay, I'll take my, Marty, the manager, went from zone A, and then he went to zone B, and you can easily track this type of stuff. In a more classic retail establishment, just think of like a shoe store, and they want to know, well, how many people go to the Nike zone?
Yep.
Like, versus how many people go to Adidas. Where are we getting more interest? Maybe we should reorient our items out in the floor to better match what people are. Same thing with a restaurant, like where are people going? So yeah, you can absolutely do that. Your second question is pretty tough, right? Because you're getting into stuff like, okay, a glass, it's clear. So cameras, these are not human beings, right? The camera's like, what is that? I want to know, is it full, not full? So you would have to build up a pretty sophisticated data set of glasses, and what does it look like when something's not full, and you would have to have cameras that would be able to judge that, in various lighting conditions and stuff. So I don't want to make it sound too easy. Yes, you could do that. I haven't actually seen that implemented yet. I've heard it talked about, so I don't have any personal experience in that, but my gut tells me that would be pretty tough. But you could do it. It'd be pretty tough though.
Got ya. So I'm gonna ask you to double click real quick on the zones portion of things, because if we think about a zone, and again, I'm a casual dining establishment. I got 50 tables in my dining room. Could I set up all 50 tables to make sure that Jeremy as the server
Oh,
walked
yeah.
into zone 1, zone 2,
Yeah.
which happened to be, because he's walking through the dining room, but I want him to stop for 2 seconds just to ask, hey, how's your meal? Are you doing okay? And then I move
Yeah.
on to table 2 or whatnot. We've all sat at a
Yes.
casual dining establishment, and right now it's a management challenge because one, staffing is low, and everybody's been having struggles getting staff, and then two, how do
Mhm.
they identify that Marty did get touched? Because you know what, if Marty's there and somebody stops at
Mhm.
Marty's table, he's most likely going to see that the beer is empty, and he knows because he's got a value in it that his tip's going
Mhm.
to be higher if he sells him another beer, so you might as well sell him another beer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even outside of this other complex issue,
Yeah.
now we've got the ability to know that he's been there. Is that something that
Oh, yeah.
is possible?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're doing so. For your listeners, just imagine you're on your computer and you're looking at a gallery of images, right, of a restaurant. Just imagine you've got 1,000 images of one restaurant location. You literally grab your mouse and you're going to drag over different zones.
Okay.
So, and you just create a zone. So you're going to create zone 1, which is table 1. You're going to then drag it over another table, that's zone 2. Drag it
Perfect.
over another table, zone 3. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to collect what's going on in that zone, right? So now you've got these zones identified,
Then you build
and the
business rules
camera,
around that somebody hit
yeah,
this
the
table for
camera,
that.
exactly,
Somebody that
exactly.
has a uniform hit this table for this amount of time.
Correct, correct,
Perfect.
correct. So we're doing it so on a more granular level. It's not exactly the use case you mentioned, but we're working with a well-known fast casual restaurant. So just think of they've got a couple hundred stores and they're making high-end sandwiches. Behind the counter, they've identified different zones for where the bread,
Hmm.
condiments is a different zone, meat is a different zone. So literally 7 small zones that are identified as a sandwich goes from point A to point Z, right? And you're making it. And yeah, so this is a very common technique. It's
I
like
love it.
I want to know what's going on in a specific area, and I just identify that, call it a zone, give it a name, and collect data around that.
And
Yeah.
then create some reports and some alerting to make sure that people are doing what you need
Yeah,
them to
then
do.
exactly. Then you're on a dashboard and you're looking at all the different tables, and you can start seeing the information coming off in real time that you want to know. Right.
Love it. So the other thing that you talked about in that example of the beer and the beer not being full and having to build this model is, I guess, this misnomer that a lot of people have when they think about computer vision and AI, that I snap one picture of a pint glass and I know what this looks like, and you chuckle. And those that are just listening on audio only, you maybe don't hear that, but I know
Right.
that's not true. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why
Right.
the more data that goes into the system and the more analyzed data that goes into the system gives you better results. Because I think that's a misnomer
Yeah.
that people have, that, funny enough, I talked about the fact that I have 4 kids. I use Google Photos, and oftentimes my daughters are mixed up by Google Photos, and Google's obviously got some
Yeah.
pretty big logarithms and pretty big database. But my
Yeah.
daughters look a lot alike, even though they're 7 years apart.
Yeah.
They look a lot alike, but the system says, oh, they must be the same person, and they try and label them the
Yeah.
same way. So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how labeling works and how the amount of data and the
Sure.
labeling can help
Yeah.
people, so that they don't think it's just, hey, you come in, you install it, and everything's working great, because it
No,
does take a
no.
bit.
Yeah, you got to train these things, right? I'll just give a funny example. Like early on, we were identifying computer cords and it kept saying, that's a snake.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, no, that is not a snake. A
It's an
3-year-old
Ethernet
knows that
cable.
that is not a snake. That is a computer cord. And so you keep telling it that it's like, it's a snake. It's not sure. And then
Uh-huh.
eventually, as you keep feeding in more and more pictures, it starts training itself and it learns that's a computer cord. And then the confidence level that it has goes up and the predictive capability goes up, right? So this is literally just training something. You start with a sample set. It's called supervised training, right? I'm supervising the machine. I'm
Yep.
giving it a starter data set of tables in a restaurant, and I'm asking it to identify tables in a restaurant. And in the beginning, it's not sure, and
Mm-hmm.
then it starts learning. And the amazing thing that we're experiencing right now, all of us in our lives in this AI revolution, is they're getting really, really good at learning. And
Yes.
then they start predicting better than a human would in many cases. And humans get tired, right? These things go 24/7 and don't get tired. They just start. So the more data that you can put in, the more confidence the model gets, the more accurate the results are, and the happier you as a user are. It literally just comes to that. There's a fancy term I love. I've been in Silicon Valley too long, I think, but it's like deep learning. It's called deep learning, right? This is the fancy title, but it really is revolutionary. And it just means that the machines, it's just math. The algorithm is deeply learning about the environment. It needed you to help it to get going, but once it got going, it picked up the baton. It's like, I'm good, I get it. That's a computer cord, right? Good job. And then it gets really, really good, and it gets even better at it. And then you just keep feeding it more information, and along you go, right? So I'm sure all your listeners have heard about ChatGPT. If they haven't tried it yet, these are enormous models that are just a bunch of data that's predicting the next word.
Yes.
Right. And just that's all it's doing. These are just prediction machines. I'm just predicting the next thing that's going to happen. And so computer vision is doing the same thing. I don't know. Was that that makes sense?
No, that was great. That was great. Well, because I think again, I think that while I love the advent of Apple and Google and Amazon and all of the things that they're doing for our world, I think that a lot of people think that just because my Alexa can do it, or my Tesla can do it, I mean, Tesla's really just it's a battery with some wheels, and I happen to drive a Tesla, but it's constantly learning, and it's this AI model that's constantly growing and building on its data set. But people don't comprehend that the early version of the Tesla 10 years ago was awful at that stuff. It didn't have any of that stuff. And now I get into the car, I rent a car when I'm out of town, and it's not a Tesla, and I want to scream because the car does everything for me, here at home.
Yeah, I think we get a little impatient. We want it to, and some of this stuff is pretty hard, right? But at the end of the day, like it's despite it's basically large data sets. In our case, that we're talking about images, just a bunch of images, and you're just getting smart about what's in that image. It's getting trained and it's producing results.
And it does take time to that point. And
it takes time.
I want our listeners to understand that it's not something that just you put it in and next week you've got everything there. It's got to take tens of thousands of images of what's going on in order to be correct.
Yeah.
Marty, what do you think? I mean, you've lived in the Silicon Valley world. What's caused the advent? Is it that the models have gotten cheaper? Is it that the compute power has gotten cheaper? Is it that the data, talk to me about why there's such a surge, whether it's ChatGPT or any of this AI. It feels like, yes, it's a buzzword and everybody wants to throw AI and machine learning and computer vision on top of stuff because it sells more. But it absolutely is truly changing. Every day I pick up my iPhone, there's something new in an app that's making my life easier and better because of these models that they have. Why do you think that is?
No. Well, you kind of nailed it, and a lot of the reasons. So the revolutionary discovery was deep learning. So it machine vision, this type of stuff's been around for a long time, right? But then all of a sudden there was a way to make machines predict things a lot better, faster, easier, right? So that happened, right? And it came out of academia, and everybody was getting really excited about it. It took a little while to hit the broader market, but that's number one. Now, number two is, remember, these things have to get on something.
Yes.
Right. So you have this model, and okay, where does it go to do something? Does it go into a computer, a server, my laptop, a phone, a camera? And that got a lot easier. And also the hardware, this happens in every technology trend, the hardware gets cheaper. It gets more powerful and it gets cheaper, except when all of us want to buy the next iPhone.
It's still cheaper to produce. They're a marketing company.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, in general, like now, like I have one customer where they're buying $70 cameras on Amazon, and they buy what's called an edge device. That's about $300, and they're good. They're doing deep learning algorithms on those devices out in the real world and getting the data that they need. So my point being that the technique got better, the processing power and the complexity and the cost at the edge got easier and cheaper. And you just combine those two things, and then now people are just, it's obviously a major trend, and everybody's putting a ton of energy into trying to figure out what it can do. ChatGPT helped in the sense that anybody who's used it, you have a browser, you ask a question, you get this answer, you're like, wow, that's really helpful.
Yes.
So I think I think in general, it just made AI look kind of practical for the average person to just sort of, and so I think that helped in a way, because it's like, okay, this is real. I thought it was some science fiction stuff, but I can now,
I can
just
interact with
get
it,
on,
and it normalizes it. It makes it
and
back
and
to
it does. It's an amazing research tool. It's like having your own personal professional professor, that's
yeah.
walking, so that's good. So I think that helped. Yeah, so all these things are combining, and here we go. New world.
I personally love it, and I'm always on the tech forward side of things. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, Marty, and then I know we've got to get close to wrapping up. But one of the big stalwarts in the industry is a company called Olo. You may be familiar with them. At their user conference earlier in 2023, they put out a video of kind of what they expect the restaurant of the future to look like, and it looks a lot like a digital version of Cheers. Is kind of how I talk about it. And so Marty goes into his normal pub that he's going to, or he goes into his normal restaurant. They know who Marty is. They know who Marty's wife is. They know who Marty's kids are. They know what Marty likes to eat, what Marty likes to drink, where he likes to sit in the restaurant. All digitally to the server, giving the Cheers-esque experience, but using computer vision, something else to get that data into the server's hands to be able to offer Marty that experience. No different than Google does when I search, or Facebook does when I search, or I'm browsing around on their web. How far away from that are we, and what do you think the risks are to getting to that point?
I mean, I love these, companies put out a vision and kind of how they're going to dominate that. And I'm not picking on Ola. I'm just saying that it sounds good. Let's back up for a second and just kind of what is actually practically needed.
Yep.
Right. So I think this is going to be user driven, not necessarily company driven.
Agreed.
So I think if it's useful for me to walk into a Starbucks and they know that I like a non-fat latte, and I'm okay with them knowing that I walked in. Let's say I opted in, and I'm okay if they do facial recognition. I'm getting value out of that when I walk in. Then I think that'll take off, right? And you mentioned a bunch of other, or Olo mentioned a bunch of other use cases. Yeah, I think all that's possible. But like any technology trend, we always talk about, it's kind of like, at the end of the day, what is really practically needed?
Yes.
Right. And I don't have a crystal ball to say exactly what's going to be practically needed. I can kind of see early, do I want to understand my customers? Yes, I think, okay, to what extent am I allowed to understand everything about Marty when he walks in? There's going to be those issues. Yeah. But I think, understanding Marty, he's a preferred customer, all that's good. And then can I improve my operations through all this new data that I'm getting? Or is it just getting in the way of me doing my job? Like, because I'm looking at a screen all day, right? So I think these things are being worked out.
And I think it's going to also be based on culture, because I was talking to somebody at this most recent trade show, and in certain cultures, and they happen to mention, and again, this is not me making this was them saying, in Asia, they've been doing some of these things for a long time. They know who you are digitally. It's not the Cheers effect of just, Dutch Bros is famous for knowing who their customers are before they drive through the drive-through line, just because they hire really good people and they see the same Ford F-150 that's white with a black top that shows up in the drive-through every day. They know who that is. I know if anybody that's a regular Starbucks user, if they go to the same Starbucks every morning, the staff oftentimes know who you are. Do we need that digitally? And if we do get it digitally, does it end up helping? And so it's just, I ask because it's this vision that YOLO had put out. And I think it's going to be that juxtaposition, even as a consumer, culturally in the United States. Is that something I want them to have access to?
Yeah.
Is that something I want them to be able to do?
Right. And at the end of the day, it's usually not either or, right? The world tends to converge to the middle. So I think digital will make a lot of sense for certain use cases. And then the human element will really be wanted in other use cases, right? It's probably going to be a hybrid of the two. Like, I'll give you an example of no human involved. So contactless checkout, right? So all of us have, we've had increasing amount of experiences with that. Can be cool, or it can be really frustrating if there's nobody around and you're trying to get something answered and you see people abandon.
Yes.
right? And why? Well, that's not good. That's not good for the brand. That's not good for the customer, et cetera. So I think this stuff is the exciting thing is we're in the middle of all this working out right now, which is cool.
Yes.
And it's going to be fun to see how it shakes out. I always try to keep my eye on what's actually needed and what's actually helping that restaurant improve their margin. Right?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I guess the last thing that I would throw at you is, what are the risks? What are the risks of doing these kind of things? I mean, obviously there's the mega risk that says computers are going to take over the world, and Elon Musk is throwing that stuff out there. But I'm not necessarily looking at that. But what are the risks?
Yeah.
What are the risks that people need to be aware of when they look at this type of technology? Is it driving behaviors within the restaurant that might be hurting margins, that might be hurting guest experience, that may be hurting the ability to deliver on the brand promise that they may have?
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, I think we got into it a little bit, which is if you're just generating data for data's sake, then it's kind of like people that can never get their head out of their phone, right?
Yep.
It's like you're just, at some point, it's just too much, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it really gets back to being super thoughtful about, okay, what do I really need to understand, right?
I love it.
And focusing on that. So I do think one of the risks is this kind of data saturation, right? It just becomes too much for an average manager to be able to really deal with. And honestly, why are you even asking me as a manager to deal with it? On the other hand, there's going to be other data that's absolutely critical. They're going to have to. The other thing I think is we didn't really talk about privacy much, but I'm sure your listeners have heard about, you can get these kind of inherent biases that are built into the algorithms, and
Yes.
It's not the machine quote doing it on purpose, but it's producing a result that we know is not fair, or we know is not accurate, or what have you. So I think we really need to be thoughtful about that stuff. And I think we are going to see some incidents where stuff like that happens, and it backfires, right? It's kind of like certain customers are being denied service, or something's happening where you just like, okay, that was really bad. So we got to be thoughtful about that. But I think a lot of people are thinking about that and trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Those are a couple of risks.
Yeah, I love that, and I would I love your description, because oftentimes we talk to customers about and listeners about how do we get to a place where you're truly solving business challenges, that you're truly driving the behavior, because too much data ends up being data or paralysis by analysis, and they can't go anywhere with it, and ultimately it doesn't enhance the guest experience or drive additional margin, drive additional revenue, and such. Correct. So Marty, I know we got to wrap up. How do people get in touch with you? How do people learn more about alwaysAI, talk to your team, and figure out if it's the right fit for their brand?
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, alwaysai.co. We have a good description of why computer vision, the uses, we were talking about. And then there's a good description of the product. So like, what is this thing? How does it work? And we love talking to people, so it's really easy to just ask to speak to an AI expert. It sounds like it goes into some black hole. There's,
so hopefully it's not an AI responding to them.
It might be, yeah, exactly. It might be me that actually picks up the phone and says hi, and just talk to us, and then we'd love to hear what you're thinking about. It's pretty easy to do like a POC or something like that, and we'd love to, we love learning about what people are doing. So
I love it. I'm grateful to be at the forefront of this revolution, as you alluded to it earlier. I think back about, if I was born 100 years ago, none of this stuff was even possible. I mean, who would have thought that you and I are probably in the same age of demographic. It's like, who would have thought that we would have had a phone in our pocket that had more power than I was telling my kids, and you'll laugh about this, that we used to have to go to computer lab to learn how to type. And they're like, what? And I'm like, that was back in elementary school. I had to learn how to type, and then got to high school and got a computer. So
I know.
And now my phone is telling me what time I need to leave to get to my next appointment. So there's
I know it's amazing. I know it's kind of fun. It's fun though.
Well, Marty, thank you so much for your time. To your listeners, guys, we know you guys have got lots of other things pulling at your time, so I appreciate you guys spending time learning more about what's going on in the world of restaurant technology. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player. Marty, thank you for your time, and to our listeners, make it a great day.
Great, thank you.